I think I'd have to start by saying that it seems uh, like a rupture in the meditative text that you've created, Harshil. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for giving so many of us who have a prior relationship with your work, Sudhir, new ways of entering it, approaching it, revisiting it. And I think in ways that significantly, because I'm watching this for the second time today, and it stills you, it moves you, and it centers you. So I feel very blessed that I'm going to be in conversation with, as Shreya put it, the maker and the muse. So, so I'm going to try and keep it short. I have lots to ask, but I think I'd like to begin. I think everybody here must have been struck by how painterly the camera can be, and also how cinematic the paintings are, which is something that we experience. Many of us were there at that retrospective. Those of us who see it for the first time on this screen through the film are reminded of this. So it seems like a very interesting dialogue between these two mediums. So I think I'd like to start off our chat by asking both of you, how has it been like to have literally this dialogue between the two mediums that you all practice, that you all live and breathe and work within? So here you have a painting called Self-Portrait with Camera and Brush. So however you'd like to take it up, either of you, both of you, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, I mean, I've seen it a few times by now, but I am struck by the fact that Harshil gets into the work in such a smooth and painterly fashion, moving across the paintings and things like that. So this dialogue between cinema and painting is, I mean, firstly, painting is a still medium. I mean, it doesn't move. And cinema, of course, the camera cannot but move. But the experience of a painter and a filmmaker derives from very common sources. And for me, for example, it's not like standing at one point and looking at something, but moving towards, away from, around something, a street or a room, whatever. And that itself is a very cinematic kind of mode. And for a filmmaker, I've always found that the attraction to still an image is something that's a strong counterpoint to movement, which is the opposite. And this kind of existence of complementaries or contrasts is what gives any medium its strength. And I think Harshil can bring that, and this is common to both of us in a sense.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming today. It means a lot. For me, I spent so much time at the retrospective and I was capturing every day. I learned various ways of seeing the painting. And that is what I was seeking for when I started building this film, that as film school students, we are constantly engaging with cinema more and not with paintings. And when I started filming his work, it opened a new dimension for me where, there are layers of magic realism in his work, which is not seen until and unless you really spend time and you see the distortions he's doing within the very immediate real world, is what attracted me on how to dissect this world and how to trace it to show that the amount of manipulation he's doing within his painting, be it perspectives, be it his formal engagements with foreground, midground and background, which are very common with cinema. So these were the engagement points for me, and that started, the journey of tracing Sudhir vis-a-vis his work and what is real. So that was my excitement.
No, I think that's lovely because what you're saying so many things here, which is what is real. And I think when Sudhir, I found it very interesting, and this is something I'd like to actually also say, that when you're in a gallery, I remember spending hours and hours at the very same retrospective and taking only like a zillion pictures on my mobile phone, this mobile phone. And it was almost as if I wanted to somehow capture everything so that I could revisit it. And there is something about gallery viewing etiquette. What I want to do is just go really very close, and gallery etiquette forbids it. Okay, so you can't dive in. So here, no, the thing is here what happens, because of scale also, and because it's a dynamic medium, and because you are offering us the gift of unhurriedness.
Yes.
So we are not wafting through, we are not rushing through, we are staying. And as a result, many of the little interstices of happenings within the big picture, which you may miss unless you've been revisiting, those just grab you. So I really loved that about it. And I wanted to ask again, both of you, because there is a sense of outside and inside, which is sometimes a little disorienting in terms of, Roberto Colasso once said, eyes watching eyes, watching eyes. And that thought came to me while I was sitting in the audience there and saying, here we are, viewers, watching this film, where people are watching the paintings which are inside the film, and this is inside a building, and then we cut away, and you do that because you take us back to the site of some of those compositions. And that struck me as an interesting thing to do, and I would love to ask why you did that, and I would love to ask you, Sudhir, how you felt about that, almost like that map making that he's doing also in a very physical space, in a geographical sense.
So I grew up in the suburban area of Ghatkopar and Thane. So my affection for his work starts from my early days of film school. And what struck me within his work is the exposition of the various areas of Bombay and how he explores them within his work. So initially I was in awe that do they even exist? Or is he just a fragment of his imagination? And my journey started off traveling to Thane quite often. The surroundings where Sir has painted, the places which are directly referred, like Rabale and stuff like Kanjur Marg. And I could see that they are there, and they have this very geographical as well as demographical as well as class. Lot of layers were explored within those spaces, and that pushed me to go to South Bombay, to go to Ulhasnagar, to go to Mumbai, and it started tracing Sudhir sort of a journey for me. And then what I said earlier, the real versus the painted actually struck me, and how like the distortion of lines, like that painting train, if you see it, you don't realize that the whole platform is a slant line. Actually, it's not very vertical. So I am doing those contrasting things where I'm showing you the railway station where the lines are very symmetrical. But when you cut to his painting, he's distorted all the lines and they're not symmetrical. So those aspects were something which were pulling me in to look at various locations in Bombay, and also the dialogue between the real and the painted. So that was majorly the reason for me to go to all those locations.
And Sudhir, because I know that you've been consistently archiving disappearances and transformations. So how would you speak a little bit about that? Because as a fellow Thaneite, when I see Pokhran, I myself over the last 20 years or so have seen the transformations. And there is something, I think that's something that links all of us who are here on the stage today, the desire to document in some sense this fabric that is mutating, it's morphing, it's changing. So Sudhir, what would you say about, like, how do you feel when you look back? How do you feel when it mutates in front of you into another sensory experience?
for me, that has, at one level, that has been my subject, that how the city and its surroundings have been changing. And many times it is read as a kind of, as you said, a documentation, which it is. But for me, it's not so much the historicity of the thing that matters. Like, it was like this 10 years back, now it is like this. Though personally, I would be thinking that, and I would be feeling that those old places are no longer there. But while I'm painting, it's actually at that point, what I am getting from that, whatever is happening to that landscape or whatever is happening to that. So it is the present that one is recording. So it's not as a document of something that's going to pass or something that will only remain as a document after some years, but it's the present, because I'm interested in what I'm seeing at that moment. And that's one reason why I find the fact that when Harshil has gone to the places where I have been earlier, which I have painted, I find it very interesting. I must say this, that some people find that is this necessary to counterpose the area that is painted and then a photograph of the area that is painting. But I find it interesting because there are, again, two mediums which are showing you, and the difference in what a camera shows you and the difference of what a painting. It's not just that I have transformed in painting and the camera has not transformed. That is not the thing. The camera too has actually transformed what is there. So reality is always slipping away from any medium, slipping away, or it's like just beyond that. So each of these mediums is trying to kind of come to terms with what, I'm sorry if I tend to kind of move away from the mic, but each of these mediums record it in a different way. And it's interesting to see. And because I've seen Harshil's earlier films and his engagement with the city, I know that it is a kind of parallel kind of story that is going on there. And he finds something in the paintings which feed the thing, and that's great about that.
No, absolutely, because I had a similar sense when I saw the thing. It's not commentating, nor is it, it's not a counterpoint in that sense. It's a situationing.
Also, yeah. I remember very early discussions with Sir when I started the film, and we had a long conversations on representation, and a lot to do with representation through cinema and representation through painting, and then cinema representing painting. So these layers of representation and what you observe and how you represent, that dialogue was very important for me to bring in the film, because that's the core of his work for me also, that what is representation in art and what are the ways one can engage with it. So that was my major reason to play with this idea of counterpoints.
I really like that. And I also liked very much the fact that there is... I also saw some of your earlier shorter films on artists, and I realized that you've taken a direction where it's going towards the non-verbal, where the art is taking the primacy, and yes. So we are not relying on talking heads, which I thought was hugely refreshing.
Thank you. And I was scared.
No, it is a risk because people do want, but what is happening as a result, at least, and I'd love to hear what everyone thinks, we'll open out very quickly, is the way in which the meditativeness of the artist's life in this art is sketched before us, and I really liked that. I just want to say a couple of things about materiality, because when the city is your material in a sense, and it is mutating, it is constantly morphing, and yet as you said, the word that I really gravitate to, and perhaps not only because I am primarily a poet, is the word rhythm that comes more often than once. And there is the rhythm of the film itself. And Sudhir, you say very beautifully that it is the rhythms that I am observing or I'm being enfolded within, from which the structures are sort of emerging. And I wonder whether that, how would you correlate that to the fact that violence, for instance, is a disruption of rhythm, makes you think of something beautiful, harmonious, in synchronization, and at the same time where you say that there is this intrinsic violence of the daily life. So how do I understand, how do I respond to it? And that response is clearly there in the work. But would you say a little bit about how does one hang on then, and maybe we'll close our conversation here, to that sense of hope? Because I think a lot of this film in a very subtle way is also saying that art is the place where we park our fiercest hopes. So I'd love to hear from both of you on that. Sudhir first, if you may.
Yeah, I mean, violence, as you say, is always the most difficult thing to represent. And various artists have done it. And for me, it has always been an undercurrent. So rather than, except in a few works where it is portrayed up front. So mostly one has to give the sense that violence is always there below the skin, below our life. And it might erupt anytime. It does erupt many times. So it's part of the rhythm of life, actually. So it's disruption of one rhythm, but that rhythm is taken over by another rhythm, So the rhythm is, they're kind of fluctuating rhythms of these things. So that's the kind of sense one gets.
Dissonance that creeps into that harmonious sound that you wish you always heard. Harshil?
So for me also, the violence within the film, the scene where we have worked a lot of back and forth where that scene should be. Initially, it was coming towards the end when we have and we would constantly discuss, and he would constantly suggest that this is not a right place for this scene, I remember. And then at one point in the edit, I realized it's about not the violence, but it's about what it does to people and how they feel. So that is what I took away from it. And the sound design also initially was a lot about slashing, a lot about immediately showing what was happening, like gun firing and all that was there with my sound designer. And then at one point we came that we should have again a rhythm, a sound which has a rhythm, but it has a lot of tenseness without having that immediate violent sound. So then we use the various textures of siren, and then we end at a burning fire sound. Like when you see the close-up of this man giving a side eye, you hear a very subtle burning sound of the fire to bring again the rhythm back to the gallery of the aftermath of it in some ways. So this was my idea roughly around that, yes.
It's wonderful you say that about sound design also.
Yeah, I just want to say that today I really experienced the sound in a real way because of this particular
the sound system is
thing.
just too good.
Yeah, so I've seen the film earlier, but today it really came through that the sound, what it's doing to the film. Yeah,
and
it's wonderful.
Also, just one thing about, because sound plays the texturality of the artist at work, because we only see Sudhir at work in a couple of places, but the presence of the brush, all of that was very beautifully done. The rupture of the cry, the collective shout, it's very, very, very quiet, this film. And then there's the collective roar of people saying Azadi, and that gives me goose flesh. So I think that this is a good moment to open it out. Lovely to have questions, comments, just indicate to whom they are. And I believe there are 2 people with microphones. Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Amazing sound design, incredible.
My sound design is here, Divyam.
Okay,
Huge round of applause.
congratulations.
I have one question. I wanted you to elaborate on the process of coming to the style of the film. You did talk about your conversation with sir, and there was back and forth. But how did you decide that this is how you're going to proceed?
So it has been a 4-year process of editing, re-editing, editing, re-editing the film. So through various cuts, we have arrived to this rhythm. And the formal choice of treating the documentary like this was because I have been making artist films the moment I passed out from film school. And I was sick of this interview tendencies where I feel the artist has already communicated with his work. The choice of him being a painter and not a writer or an orator itself says that the communication is done and now you take ahead the work. And with him, I had that liberty where he wasn't very interested in the film, or so to say, to the beginning. Like, he was like, okay, make the film. Like, the other artists which I have engaged with are too involved with what the film is and what their presence is. With Sir's case, there was no such thing. And I got 3 months of free ground to shoot in NGMA Mumbai, which is like a dream. To, get the relay to take the camera anytime inside to shoot. And then after that, I had this abundance of archival material of his work. And then I started seeing the narrative building into it. And then I decided that I want to tell this film through his paintings and not through his per se voiceovers or interviews. So, yeah. Thank you.
There's one here, right ahead.
Hello, Sam. Yeah, an incredible work. I understand it is not a biopic, certainly, and there is much written on Dr. Patwardhan already. However, there are nuances about in his early formative time when he is looking at the people, his patients being portrayed in his works, and also him taking the exhibition, the works within his subjects. So how do you make the choice of course, I'm not saying, again, even when the idea of exclusion, inclusion comes here. So as a filmmaker, how do you look at these exclusions? Because I think, in my view, that's also something that builds onto his visual imagery or idiom of what Dr. Patwardhan is.
Yeah, sure. So that was a big crisis for me. But at very early point, I realized that I am engaging with his work and it's my formal expression of his work. And I wanted to formally engage with his work and aesthetics and style and not delve into his personal life, because there is already lot written. There's lot, regardless of lot written or not, that's not the case. For me, my conscious choice was to engage with the medium, and how he engages with this flat canvas is what was more exciting for me as a filmmaker than wanting to know where he was born, what kind of shows he did, because I feel that's a lot already in the public discussion and public diaspora, be it the show he did, which he traveled to Thane and he showed it in Thane. So I have been through all that. So it's like 40 edits have been done to come to terms with the idea that we are engaging with the aesthetic, formal and style, not with personal and biographical.
Also, I'd add that the fact that it does not become interpretive of the work is very important. And I think the fact that it presents the work from his point of view, it's the way in which he has seen the work, but he's not giving you an analysis, he's not giving you an interpretation. So that you are left with the work, with someone else taking the work to you. And it's up to you to kind of respond and take it in your own way.
Also I found very interestingly that having said that this is not, clearly not a biographical, chronological, but it's very beautifully punctuated by those sparse lines which show the progression,
Yes,
and
within his
with,
brush strokes also.
yeah, and also not in a schematic way, but in a very subtle way. And I thought that was enough. That was like a thread, which if we wanted, we could hold on to that thread.
Yes, very much
So that was something that I
like
think
his figures
worked.
also, like I have followed the work linearity in some way, and his figures also change to what they are by now to what they were.
Yes.
So if one is keenly observing, they could clearly see the decades in which what is painted.
Yes. Any more questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you to you both. That was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I wondered if I could ask about a specific work, which is Mumbai Proverbs, the piece that we see towards the end of the film as well. Dr. Patwardhan, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how, because Mumbai is an impossible subject in some senses, right? The city is so vast, it is sort of so mutable, there's so much happening. But you seem to capture a tremendous amount of that. And I wondered if you could talk to us about the multi-panel work and the scale of that and how that interacts with what you were trying to do specifically with that piece. And perhaps if you could talk us through the position of that work in your film and maybe how that guides the narrative, because I think it's a piece that'll stick with a lot of us after we've left this room. So it'd be wonderful to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that work is actually the only kind of work that I've done as a commission, and it came to me as from the Mahindras, and they were very open about it and said that they want a painting on Bombay. They knew my earlier work, so they knew what to expect in a sense. So for me, it was very much a problem. How does one do a painting? One can do paintings of like different paintings of different places or different experiences, but how to encapsulate this? And in fact, what was the clue for me was the train journey from Thana to Viti, So, or it could be from Borivali to Churchgate or whatever. So that rhythm, that train rhythm, moving from, in a sense, the way in which Bombay has developed. South Bombay, early Bombay, then the mill lands, then the suburb, then you start into the kind of middle class, Sion, this, that, and then move further to the suburbs and the growing part of Bombay, industrial Bombay in between somewhere. So there was a kind of geographical line there, there was a timeline also there, and there was this rhythm, as I said, So in fact, the work kind of works with a certain kind of linear rhythm, which is a translation of what you go through while just taking this 1 hour journey, So that was essentially the clue that. And then you mentioned inside and outside, for example, which is also a preoccupation, that you see Bombay from various ways. You see it from far, you see it from near, you see it from inside houses, you see it from, So there's the panorama, there's the participation on the street, and there is this various things. So all that one was able to kind of, bring it all in some kind of mess or mesh, whatever it is. Yeah.
For me, it was a very important point in the film. There were possibilities of us ending the film there, in fact, because it somewhere culminates the whole film in certain way. So it was also about speaking what he said, that the journey, but for us, it was also feeling isolated. The feeling I wanted to give with that two people sitting at the end and looking at the painting is that the city is so vast. There's so much happening, but there is this still, that the next painting which comes is this old man within the lobby, and I pull out, is to show that still you can feel isolated observing this city and the constant change. So the feeling which I was going for, that after that I can again enter the ideas of the city with Sir, that it's not that the film is just oscillating between the political and the personal, it's constantly moving in and out. So film starts with a very social milieu then gets into a personal milieu, and with Mumbai Proverbs we go back to again the social engagements of his paintings, be it Distant City, which was a 2020 work, and so on. So roughly that was the reason to have that painting at around that 40th minute in the film.
In fact, Distant City seems like a very
Later work.
important
Marker of time.
marker, because
Yes.
as you know, 2020, and you see
Pandemic.
what's going on there. And also interestingly, for me, because it was also, you were very generously, Mustansir Dalvi's poems, where he's talking about the walking migrants, and your painting graces that book. So bringing the Distant City closer is, I think, what you do. You
Yes.
bring that distant city closer to us. You allow us to feel our own entanglement, I think, with it.
Yes.
I doubt whether anybody who's committed to this city can escape its tentacles. And I like the idea that it's a mess and it's a mesh. But it's a glorious mess. Are there any other questions, comments? I have no idea about the time. So there's one right at the back, yeah.
Hi. The most striking frame in the movie for me was to see Dr. Patwardhan's paintings in Dr. Patwardhan's house. It's the first time I had ever seen a painting in a lack of a better word, normal house, a house that doesn't look like it's on Architectural Digest. Which, it was very refreshing to see that, and it made me think of, okay, wait, maybe I could have paintings in my house if I don't have to have a big beautiful house to have a big beautiful painting in it. So that was really lovely to see. That's all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
That's a lovely comment. Because, this thing about, I've been speaking to some artists about this, Sudhir, about the artist studio. As a writer, I always feel, my goodness, artists are so lucky. Because when you watch them at work, and filmmakers too, you can see something is going on. When a writer is writing, it's probably the most boring thing in the world. But I was firmly told by my artist friends that this is only the writer fetishizing the studio. So the normalization of the studio, and that there is no gap.
Yes.
There is no artificial boundary between my living, the space where I live and the space where I create. I think that's quite wonderful. I think I'm seeing things. Probably because I really saw a hand over there. Does anybody else have any questions? Are we out of time? Somebody...
Just very quickly.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Just, would say that it also highlights his humanist approach.
Yes.
It's at the core of his work, apart from his social commitments, yes.
Yes. Yeah. We'll wait for the microphone so that everyone can hear you.
Congratulations, and it's an honor to see your work here. And great job, Harshil, on the sound design. I think the use of brushes, where the sound builds up, it's a remarkable, really good work. I wanted to understand, what was your reaction when you saw the film for the first time?
Yeah, well, as he said that, we went through it. We were talking about it for a long time, and then I was seeing it as it was building up. So, in a sense, it was not like the finished thing that I saw for the first time. I saw things. We had, in fact, lots of edits, yeah. And there were lots of things that I was not, my own voice I was not comfortable with. That was one thing. That he tried to use more of my voice, but it didn't work, I think. So, yeah. So ultimately, what we settled for was much a better thing. So, but for me, it was essentially, when the retrospective happened at National Gallery, many people ask, how does it feel like, your whole life is kind of laid out in front of you, and there's a sense of distance. I couldn't relate to those works directly. I knew, yeah, I did this 30 years ago, 40 years ago, this, that, but I couldn't relate. But the film was something that allowed me to re-look at it, because I suppose because of its structure, because it's structured and small, and it traces that. So it allowed me to look at how things had progressed. So for that was a takeaway point for me. Yeah.
I think that's also beautiful, because this does happen. You feel a great distance from earlier work, and you might also be very critical about it, or you may say, okay, but that was another me altogether. But I think there's a great sense of intimacy that this film inhabits, and perhaps that was I don't know, maybe that's one reason to feel that you could have a close relationship with works you felt very distant from in time. There's a painting that I love in your work and in the film, which is called Bylane's Saga.
Yes.
And so much happens in the bylanes. If only we care to look, and if only we care to go down those roads. It's wonderful that in this bylane, in this city of ours, we've had this experience this evening. I'm hoping it will be folded into the memory of the city,
Yes.
which I often like to think of as a living, breathing organism rather than something that is crushed in concrete. And I do believe that this imperishable and growing archive that we make as a collective, as individuals and as artists, is something that we should hang on to, especially in these moments. Thank you both very much. Thank you all for being
Thank
a
you.
beautiful audience.
Words? No, come on. I think it would be really lovely to hear. Shanta, come.
Well, it was great to watch the film develop with Harshil coming and discussing little in the initial stage and watching and noticing. And I would always feel, how is he going to progress without discussing this with him? And so we used to say we have to watch, because for many, many months we were watching him come and see. And then suddenly one day he said, yes, I've done it. May I come? So when he entered the house, I said, most welcome. And it was a wonderful experience, because the way he had thought of everything. And
I love that.